Hello, everybody, and welcome to the finals of the StarCityGames.com Columbus Open. We're playing Modern, brought to you by Ultimate Guard. I'm Chris Van Meter with Andrew Boswell. For those of you just joining us, Tom Ross, Green-White Tron was our first seed coming into the top 8 from the Swiss. Matt Ayers is third. They're about to battle. Tom is on a mulligan to 6.
Oh,
and
my
Matt is
God.
on a mulligan to 5.
Jeez, I don't want to talk over you, but that is brutal.
And Tom has Relic of Progenitus on turn 1.
And this is so relevant
deck.
against the Neonate, too, because the way Neonate works is you discard the card as part of the cost, meaning that Tom would be able to exile it before Matt would be able to draw it. So if Matt was probably planning on dredging on turn 1, and Tom Ross has 2 Relic of Progenitus in his deck and has it on turn 1. Unbelievable.
All right, Tom has another Tron piece and an Expedition map. So that Neonate's going to start attacking. He's going to bring Tom down to 19.
It's not sacrificing, unfortunately.
And it looks like Matt he does not have another land. He was on a mulligan to 5 here, though.
And so if I was Tom Ross, this would make me think that Matt Ayers only has 1 dredger. So we'll see how Tom wants to navigate this. He's got a little bit of breathing room. He's starting to get Tron online, so he basically just needs to find a fatty, and he wants to keep a mana open for that Relic of Progenitus so that if Matt Ayers tries to do something fancy and is able to put multiple cards into the graveyard, Tom Ross can just sacrifice the Relic and get rid of everything.
All right, so it looks like Matt is going to sacrifice the Neonate and discard a Grave Troll here on Tom's end step. Tom is going to use the Relic of Progenitus to get rid of the Neonate, but the discarded card and sacrifice are both part of the cost.
Right, so I misspoke before.
They're both in the graveyard at the same time. And Matt is going to dredge that Grave Troll.
And Tom choosing to be a little more patient with his Relic of Progenitus means that he wants to get a little more out of this. He's willing to give Matt 1 dredge, and Tom wants to exile a bit more than that.
All right, well, Matt is going to hit a Dakmor Salvage on his dredges, and now he's going to dredge back the Dakmor Salvage. Neonate's going to enter the red zone, crack in for Tom, bring him to 18.
And this is actually a pretty good situation for Matt Ayers. He's only on 1 land, but he's essentially starting to get all systems online. If Tom Ross wants to exile his Relic of Progenitus and exile Matt's entire graveyard, Matt still has another Insolent Neonate to potentially rebuild his graveyard.
All right, so Tom is going to use his Chromatic Star. That's going to give him a green mana. He can cast Ancient Stirrings. He's just looking for another land.
Yeah, preferably an Urza's Mine, I believe, is what he would really like to have.
Well, he does have that Expedition map that he can use to go find it, but he doesn't want to leave himself down without having, a mana for that Relic of Progenitus.
Yeah, and that said, Insolent Neonate can sacrifice itself at instant speed, so there's good reason for Tom to have a mana open at all times.
All right, so he is just going to find that get a power plant off of the Ancient Stirrings, play another Chromatic Star, and pass the turn back to Matt.
And if Tom wants to win this match, winning game 1 is a pretty important part of making sure that happened, because game 2 and 3 are where Tom Ross is really gonna, get some bigger percentage points with the post-board games, because he is gonna have access to his sideboard cards.
All right, well, Matt is going to dredge at the end of Tom's second main phase. He hits the other Dakmor Salvage along with a Bloodghast. He had discarded a Bloodghast, and there was a...
Wow, and Matt Ayers knows exactly what he's doing. This may be his first time in Star City top 8, but it is not his first time on the rodeo.
And so now he just gets to untap and Cathartic Reunion, and there weren't any prized amalgams in his graveyard, so he doesn't even lose the prized amalgams. There were just 2 copies of Bloodghast. That was it. There are a couple prized amalgams in this dredge.
And I think he hit another Narcomoeba.
And now he just hit the Narcomoeba.
And with the land drop, he can hit the Bloodghast too, although I don't think he has one.
It doesn't look like he has a land drop.
Still, Matt set that up perfectly to make it so that he forced Tom to use his Relic of Progenitus, and Matt had planned it perfectly so that he would be able to instantly refill his graveyard. So very well done by Matt Ayers. And this is a turn where Tom Ross can actually get some mana going. He could, I think he could potentially crack that expedition map and finish his Tron and use Urza's Tower to play his Oblivion Stone. Yeah.
So he does have Tron online, and he can start generating mana. This is a deck, actually, that Ugin is very good against.
Oh, yeah. Exiling is very, very relevant.
And with both of those, Dakmor Salvage is gone. Matt's only going to be able to find some lands to get back those Bloodghast via Life from the Loam.
Yeah. He does play 2 Life from the Loams, and so between all of his dredging, it shouldn't be too hard for him to find one. With Tom Ross's life total so high, there's also consideration for Tom to potentially go after Matt's green mana once that Karn gets deployed.
So Tom is going to have 1 colorless mana floating. He's just going to get a star and play it, or a sphere and play it. See if he decides to play his Oblivion Stone. Nope, he's just going to sacrifice the Chromatic Star. Man, you know what else would actually be pretty good in the sideboard of this Tron deck? Bojuka Bog.
Oh, yeah.
Since
Yeah, with the expedition map.
You can go find it.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And Sylvan Scrying? Oh, man.
It has a Ghost Quarter on the sideboard, so Bojuka Bog is certainly not out of the realm of possibility.
All right, well, Tom is just going to cycle a couple spheres. Path to Exile's not bad.
Yeah, Path to Exile is not bad. It's going to be a good answer for the prized Amalgam, but Matt Ayers' engine is going to keep on keeping on, so to speak. And a land will actually trigger the Bloodghasts, which is kind of nice, too.
That land is going to trigger that Bloodghast.
So,
and it gives Matt 3 mana to flashback any Faithless Lootings that he happens to dredge into.
Yeah, he's also potentially going to be able to...
It also gives him a 2nd red mana to be able to flashback Conflagrate if he needs to.
Yep.
And he can flashback Rally the Answers, Rally the Peasants.
Yeah.
Well, there was a Loam. We're going to get a Narcomoeba, get back Life from the Loam.
Yeah, and I would really like to see a Faithless Looting here.
Nope, one of those Narcomoebas can't attack.
I'm not 100% sure if he has access to a Faithless Looting right now. See Cathartic Reunion, Simian Spirit Guide, and Insolent Neonate as the red cards, but...
3 damage going to knock Tom Ross down to 15. Life from the Loam. It's going to be cast targeting Gemstone Mine.
And I think basically what Matt Ayers is doing here is he wants to build up a full grip of lands in his hand so that he can potentially finish Tom off with a big Conflagrate.
This also may put him above hand size.
Yeah, so he can discard a prized Amalgam if it's stuck in his hand.
Right, well, he is just going to play a land and pass the turn. Ooh, Thomas found a Wormcoil Engine, which is not all that bad.
Yeah, Wormcoil Engine will do a lot to stabilize the ground, and gaining Tom's 6 life a turn is also going to be pretty valuable. That said, he still needs to worry about potentially getting punked out of the game by a card like Rally the Peasants. This is a pretty close game. I would have guessed with Tom Ross's turn 1 Relic of Progenitus that it was potentially over, especially with Tom on the play, but...
Well, you've played enough Dredge to know that the 1 hate card is generally not going to be enough.
Yeah, that is frequently what I say, is you need 2 hate cards to beat Dredge, and Matt Ayers is certainly proving me right here. But he was stuck on 1 land.
Tom might just find the other relic.
It's true. He does have 2 in his deck for a reason. You don't put them both in not to draw them.
That's true. All right, Tom is going to use his Expedition map. Boy, he wishes he could get a Bojuka Bog.
Mm-hmm.
He's just going to get a Razor Verge Thicket. He does not have green-white mana.
Yeah, it's pretty annoying that the Razor Verge Thicket comes into play tapped, but
He does have the one brush land that he can get instead.
yeah, I suppose if he doesn't need the mana right away, there's no harm in having it come to play tapped. And
Well, there's a Wormcoil Engine, and he's going to pass the turn back.
Wormcoil Engine's pretty tough to deal with on this board state. Matt's going to be able to attack in the air and threaten a relatively powerful crackback. But the other thing you can do is just play Stinkweed Imp and block it.
Yeah, well,
Oh, and there's a Conflagrate.
Stinkweed Imp is going to be dredged. We're going to have a Conflagrate and another Bloodghast.
And I would assume that Matt has enough cards in hand where he can actually kill this Wormcoil Engine if he were to choose to do so.
Now, he might not need to. Because
And we also see that Rally of the Peasants in the graveyard, too.
Because with the
Can't
rally
forget
in the
about that.
graveyard, it might just be better for him to get as much damage onto Tom as possible and then win with rally the following turn.
Yeah, there's certainly a few ways that he could go about doing this.
Looks like he has a prized amalgam in his hand. So what we might see here is the Conflagrate is going to be flashed back, pitching some cards, including the prized amalgam, and then he'll be able to play a land to get back the Bloodghast. Oh, he is just going to kill the Wormcoil Engine.
And now when he plays a land, it'll trigger the Bloodghast, trigger the prized amalgam at end of turn, and he'll have a creature that can potentially trade with one of the Wormcoil tokens, as well as a pretty solid ground force to counterattack Tom if Tom chooses to attack with the lifelinker.
So we're going to attack for 2 and bring Tom down to 13.
This turned into a pretty close game. Tom would really like to have something like Ugin to potentially lock this away.
A Mana Confluence will get back a Bloodghast, trigger the prized amalgam on Tom's end step. And on Matt's end step, and the prized amalgam will enter tapped. Pass the turn over to Tom.
And so with these two Wormcoil tokens, Tom doesn't really have good attacks, and he doesn't really have good blocks either, because there are those 3 flying creatures, and the prized amalgam can still serve in and just, come back into play later.
Now with that rally, the peasants in the graveyard, we might just see Tom sit on an Oblivion Stone here, just to make it so he doesn't die in combat.
Yeah, I think he might have to do that. I think that's basically his play to stay alive. Playing something like a Karn is certainly not going to do the trick, killing one thing. With Rally of the Peasants, Matt Ayers can deal 9 damage just from his creatures that attack in the air.
All right, well, one of the worms is going to attack. I don't know if it was the Lifelink or the Death Touch worm.
I would assume that it's the lifelink.
Looks like it is the Lifelink. So Matt will fall to 17. Tom is going to go up to 16. Sanctum of Ugin is going to be fetched with the Sylvan Scrying.
And this is Tom setting things up. I think a likely line of play is for him to wipe the board and then start chaining Fatty into Fatty. And we do see both Conflagrates exiled. So Tom Ross, knowing the deck list, he knows from here that he's not going to get burned out. So if he can just answer Matt Ayers' board, Tom is going to be okay.
Well, there's an Oblivion Stone, and the Sanctum of Ugin is just going to pass the turn. Matt's going to untap. Let's see if he dredges.
And notably, this is not an exile effect. Lodestone or Oblivion Stone is just says destroy, so Matt can still reload after this Oblivion Stone gets cracked.
He also, if he happens to have 6 mana with a Grave Troll, he can actually regenerate the Grave Troll too.
Yep. Can also just play it post-combat, since Tom almost has to crack the Oblivion Stone now.
Yeah, this is going to force Tom to crack the stone once Matt uses that rally.
If I were Matt, I just wouldn't use the rally.
Yeah. Tom's just going to use the stone now. And now we're going to get a giant grave troll.
Huge. Although it's one individually big threat, and Karn Liberated is very good at dealing with that kind of
Which is
creature.
exactly what Tom has in his hand. So this
Yep.
this line is playing exactly into what Tom wanted to happen.
And let's see how big this guy is.
14.
Oh, man. Not too shabby. Not too shabby at all.
Nope. But his earthly chains will be liberated.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, there are more grave trolls that Matt can just dredge into and play. He even has another one in his hand, so Karn can kill this one. Karn can kill the next one, but there's just going to keep there's still going to be more coming.
Man, Tom's got a lot of mana. He could do some real nasty things this turn.
I do believe that that Sanctum of Ugin can be sacrificed to the Karn, though.
If that's the case, or if that's the case, I believe with another Tron land, Tom is going to be able to just really run away with this game.
Just going to go get an Ulamog.
Oh, wow. And what's great about this is just a one-turn clock. Matt Ayers probably doesn't have very many cards in his library.
On top of that, Karn will take care of the Grave Troll. Matt can play another one, and then Ulamog will take care of the Grave Troll and Matt's 5th land, so he can't play another one.
Yeah. You know, over and over again, we see Tom Ross with this Sanctum of Ugin. It's almost like the warning sign to know that the game is just about over.
Yeah. All right, Tom is going to go get a Ghost Quarter and pass the turn. 1, 2, 3 is going to be the dredge for Life from the Loam.
And if Matt had at least been able to knock Tom down to 10 life, his Bloodghast would have been able to have haste from here, but he wasn't actually able to do quite as much as he wanted to.
Well, it looks like there are actually only 3 cards left in Matt's library.
So he's almost out of gas in a number of ways.
That is true. The Life from the Loam is going to get back a few lands. He's going to be able to use them to rebuy some Bloodghasts.
Yeah, the Bloodghasts will not have haste. And I think he may only have 2 Bloodghasts, which lines up a little inconveniently against a card like Ulamog.
Yeah. And there's going to be 2 Amalgams that will trigger and enter. There's a Sylvan Scrying. So Tom will be able to cash in his Karn for one of the Amalgams, and then Ulamog for another Amalgam and a Bloodghast. And that will be about what she wrote.
Yeah, and honestly, Tom can even just plus the Karn. I don't even think he needs to minus it here. His life total is so high. The Karn is likely to, or the Ulamog is likely to deal with both the prized Amalgams, and then the Ulamog can block one of the Bloodghasts, and the most damage Matt can push through is just 2 damage. Wow, Tom Ross, what a masterclass.
Just get a deck to the dredge opponent.
Yeah, I need to figure out if Tom Ross gives lessons, because maybe that's what I should do this week in preparation for my next Open.
He might. All right, well, Karn is going to take care of one of the Bloodghasts. And Matt Ayers is going to scoop it up. Tom Ross is going to take game 1 here against Dredge with green-white Tron. Let's take a look at these players' sideboards, see if we can figure out what their plan of attack is going to be. On Tom's side, we have 3 Blessed Alliance, 3 Nature's Claim, 3 Warping Whale, 2 Rest in Peace, 2 Thragtusk, 1 Ravenous Trap, 1 Ghost Quarter. How do you think Tom's going to sideboard?
So there's 3 cards specifically for this matchup, and they're the 2 Rest in Peace and the Ravenous Trap. They are going to be all-stars against the Dredge engine. And then on top of that, Tom can also consider the 2 Thragtusks as a way to buy time, buffer his life total, and then you could give a little bit of consideration to Warping Whale also. It's kind of a nice answer to Bloodghast. It also counters Cathartic Reunion and Faithless Looting. That said, a lot of Tom's top end and his ways to find lands are pretty important, so he probably doesn't want to sideboard too much, but you know, I expect to see some number of the Warping Whales in, if not all of them.
Now on Matt's side, we have 1 Vengeful Pharaoh, 1 Nod of the Bone, 4 Nature's Claim, 1 Ancient Grudge, 1 Dark Blast, 2 Collective Brutality, 1 Lightning Axe, 4 Leyline of the Void. How do you think he's going to side?
So I like the Ancient Grudge a lot. I also think that he's going to be bringing in some number of the Nature's Claims. Nature's Claims are going to be a great way to not only disrupt Tom's game plan of stabilizing with Oblivion Stones and finding specific cards with Expedition Map, but it's also going to be able to target the Rest in Peace that Matt Ayers knows is coming in because these players know each other's deck lists.
That makes perfect sense. Now, we're here in Columbus. Beautiful Columbus. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, I love this place.
But next weekend, the SCG Tour goes to Knoxville, so let's learn a little bit more about that event.
Join the SCG Tour November 19th through the 20th for the Knoxville Open Weekend. On Saturday, play in the Standard Open main event. Every competitor gets a playmat featuring Dark Salvation, plus our latest Invitational Winners token just for playing. The top 8 finishers earn a spot in an upcoming Invitational and get 1 step closer to the Players' Championship. On Sunday, it's your format, your tournament, as you choose between Modern and Legacy Classics. All participants get an Invitational Winners token, Modern players receive a Steel Overseer playmat, Legacy players receive a Sensei's Defining Top playmat, and the top 4 competitors in each Classic qualify for an Invitational. There's plenty more to do in Knoxville. All weekend, play in side events and earn tickets to spend at the SCG Prize Wall. Between rounds, meet the weekend's special guest, Magic artist RK Post. And don't forget to tune into SCG Live as Matthias Hunt, Ryan Overturf, and Nick Miller bring you coverage all weekend long. The Knoxville Open Weekend is November 19th through the 20th. Step into the spotlight.
Hello and welcome back to the SCG Tour Columbus Open Finals between Tom Ross and Matt Ayers. Tom is on Green-White Tron, Matt is on Dredge. Tom was our first seed coming into the top 8. Matt was our 3rd seed, so not too shabby, but Tom is up a game here. After watching that first game, still giving Tom the edge, or do we think that Matt might be able to pull it out?
I still give Tom the edge. I think it's actually going to get harder in these post-board games because Tom Ross has such good sideboard cards against what Matt is bringing to the table. Matt still is going to have a good chance to win, though. I think those Simian Spirit Guides are something that can pull some serious weight against a card like Rest in Peace that can't come into play until turn 2. And also, we haven't really mentioned this yet, but Tom Ross, he doesn't actually have access to that much white mana. He can use his Chromatic Spheres and Chromatic Stars to make white mana, but he doesn't have that many lands that produce white. And so it may be a little difficult for Tom to actually have a Rest in Peace on turn 2, even if it's in his opening hand. So a Rest in Peace on turn 3 may be what should be expected, in which case Matt Ayers is going to have a little bit more time to get his engine going on. I would expect Matt to win this game because he's on the play, but then in Game 3 with Tom Ross on the play, I think Tom Ross is probably going to be able to take it.
All right, well, our players are going to take their opening 7 and decide if it's what they like or not.
I wonder if we can have something as exciting as a turn 1 Relic of Progenitus.
Well, Matt is going to mulligan.
Man, I know when I was playing Dredge and someone had a main deck piece of Graveyard Hate, it was just the most tilting thing in the world. I remember playing against an Anafenza, the Foremost, and I was like,
what are you
oh
doing?
my dear lord, that is so much better than Cletus. It comes down a turn earlier, and you can't do anything against it. And I played against it in a game 1. I was like, oh my god. So, you know, sometimes these happen when you're playing Dredge. There's incidentally some good Graveyard Hate that will sometimes show up in these main decks.
All right, well, it looks like Matt is going to 5. While he's shuffling up, let's take a quick look at this prize payout. Just a reminder of what's on the line here. The winner of this match is going to get $5,000 and a whopping 30 SCG points, while the second place finalist will get $2,000 and 25 points. The rest of the top 8 was able to get a decent amount of cash and a handful of SCG
yeah,
points.
so that means there's a lot of pressure on these two players. The points matter a lot, but this is also a $3,000 game of Magic.
It is. Matt's going to keep his 5, and he's going to start off with a Copperline Gorge and an Insolent Neonate.
And we'll see if Matt can start dredging before his next draw step. A good time to pop this Insolent Neonate is at the end of your opponent's post-combat main phase, because that way if you can put a Narcomoeba and a Prized Amalgam into the graveyard, they'll both be able to attack on your turn.
All right. Well, Matt is just going to attack for 1, knocking Tom down to 19. Tom does have an Expedition map, so he will be able to assemble Tron on turn 3, which is what he's been doing all weekend long.
Yeah, it really is.
All right, Faithless Looting.
And Matt Ayers, you know, we haven't really talked about him a whole lot before seeing him in this top 8, but he's got an innovative take on Dredge. I thought it was a really good call for this specific weekend, and this is his first top 8, and so far it seems like he's been playing quite well. So certainly a player that we're going to need to watch out for in the future.
And we're going to see a Stinkweed Imp as the first discard for Faithless Looting. Matt's going to deliberate on what else he wants to discard.
Yeah, and these are the games where you got to think a lot when you're playing the Dredge, because you know there's going to be a piece of graveyard hate coming up in the near future. And so you need to essentially budget your dredgers and discard outlets appropriately so that once one piece of graveyard hate comes into play, you're going to be able to slog through it.
All right, so it looks like Matt is going to...
Uh-oh, and I think he might have missed his Narcomoeba trigger.
He did. So
maybe the nerves are getting to him. It's pretty scary to be down a game against Tom Ross. And this is a $3,000 match of Magic, so I would certainly be nervous too.
And he's just going to pass the turn back to Tom. And there is a Relic of Progenitus for Tom Ross.
Yeah, a full graveyard, but only 1 land in play. And oh, what a brutal play from Tom Ross. Senpai, notice me, please. Teach me how to play Magic. Tom Ross, I mean, they call him the boss for a reason.
All right, well, Matt found a second land, and he has an Narcomoeba, so we got a clock.
I mean, you got to win the game somehow.
It looks like Tom has some Warping Whales, though, so I don't know if that Narcomoeba is very long for this world.
The thing is, Tom Ross can just ignore it. I mean, sure, nibble at my life total. Come at me, bro.
All right, Expedition map is going to be sacrificed. Tom's going to go get an Urza's Mine. Let's see if we're going to add insult to injury and just get rid of that Narcomoeba now. Nope.
Tom's like, whatever, you can
turn.
have it. I'll let you have something to play with on your side of the board while I do all the things on my side.
All right, Narcomoeba's going to attack Tom down to 18. He does have Tron and a lot of mana. Looks like we're going to get a Chromatic Star, or Chromatic Sphere and a Cycle. He's got a green mana floating.
You know, these Relic of Progenituses from
Tusk.
Tom Ross seem like there's something out of, like, fan fiction. I mean, he has it in Game 1, and then in Game 2, he gets to use it to basically completely deplete Matt Ayers of resources.
All right, so Thragtusk is going to bring Tom up to 22. Matt's just going to keep fighting the good fight, attacking with that Narcomoeba.
Got to win somehow.
Tom is going to cycle a Chromatic Star.
And to be fair, the Dredge deck is very explosive. Matt Ayers, he could just find something like a Cathartic Reunion one turn with a Dredger and all of a sudden be right back in the game. But it's going to be pretty difficult for him to make that happen, and he still needs to worry about whatever else Tom Ross might have in his hand.
All right, Tom is going to cycle another Chromatic Sphere. Got a Chromatic Star and a Sylvan Scrying. It's going to let him go get maybe a Ghost Quarter. Nope, Sanctum of Ugin.
And that's how we know that the game is going to be ending soon.
Sign of the end.
Sanctum of Ugin. There's no greater way to tell if a game is going to end
this is
in
not,
the next 2 turns.
This is not playing fair. There is nothing fair happening about Sanctum of Ugin.
Every time we've seen it on camera, it has either elicited an immediate concession or it's been a 1-turn clock.
All right, Matt's going to attack Tom down to 21. Oh, we got another card to cast. Cathartic Reunion.
And there we go.
It's going to be canceled by, countered by Warping Whale. The discard is an additional cost, And it's a sorcery.
Oh, man.
So Tom is going to use the rarely used piece of that buffalo.
And Tom has been getting the most favorable trades you could ever imagine for. We considered having him use the Warping Wheel on the Narcomoeba, and Tom Ross just says, no, I've got better uses for this card. And then he uses it as a counterspell against Cathartic Reunion, and it's just a blowout.
All right, Thragtusk is going to attack for 5, knocking Matt down to 10. We have an Oblivion Stone on the battlefield. Grave Troll is going to be dredged.
Now, can Matt Ayers cobble something together?
Well, there is 2 Bloodghast and a Dakmor Salvage.
Unfortunately, those cards don't even race a Thragtusk.
No, they don't. Thragtusk is going to attack for 5. Narcomoeba is going to jump in the way finally. Got to slow down, pump the brakes. There's the Sanctum of Ugin.
You did a lot of good work, Narcomoeba. Your efforts will be remembered in all time.
Expedition map and a pass. Life from the Loam.
Oh, this is going to be multiple Bloodghast triggers.
Ooh, and a Prized Amalgam.
And you can see the Dredge deck starting to rebuild, but unfortunately it's just a little too late.
Oh, and Warping Well is going to counter Life from the Loam.
Jeez. And now Matt's down to just 1 land. So even if he dredges that Life from the Loam, he's not going to be able to recast it. Tom Ross just has his number every step of the way. Just gets the most favorable trades, puts Matt in the worst position possible.
Oblivion Stone is going to put a Fate counter on that Thragtusk, just in case. Expedition map is going to go find another Urza's Tower to add to the hundreds of mana that Tom has available.
And if you have little kids in the room, shield their eyes. This is just brutal.
Thragtusk is going to attack Matt, dropping him down to 5. And even if Matt happens to dredge the Dakmor Salvage to get back those Bloodghast, they can't block.
I can't believe it. How does Tom Ross do it? I mean, we thought this would be close, and Matt Ayers certainly did everything he could, but Tom Ross just did way more than we thought he would be able to in this matchup. Now, that says Matt Ayers did suffer a mulligan to 5 2 games in a row, and maybe he can find... Never mind.
All right, well, he is just going to dredge. Dakmor Salvage doesn't find a Narcomoeba, although the Fate counter on that Thragtusk definitely would have sealed Matt Ayers' fate. Tom Ross is your SCG Columbus champion.